click is all it takes to lose everything.
We are in a cyber war. You can either be a defendant or you could be a victim.
And the battle continues. Windows versus Mac. Which is more secure? Which is the better operating system? I hear this all the time. Now, the question I often get asked, is Mac OS more secure than Windows? The answer is no. For the last 5 years, I've been going in and tracking the number of vulnerabilities for Mac OS and the number of vulnerabilities for Windows, and month after month, year after year, they are within 1% of each other. They all have the same number of vulnerabilities, because bottom line, writing an operating system as complex as Mac or Windows, there's always going to be issues, there's always going to be security issues. So this whole question of, is one more secure than the other, is no, but that's the wrong question. The better question is, if you're using a Mac, are you less susceptible to an attack? That's the better question, and that answer is yes. And simple reason. Most of the attacks today are not targeted. Typically, you are not being targeted by the Russians, the Chinese, or the North Korean. They are basically going after numbers. They are targeting the low-hanging fruit. They're going to go in and hit hundreds of thousands of people and try to play the odds to break into as many systems as possible. So question, if I'm playing the odds, if I want to try to break into as many systems as I can, am I going to go after an operating system that has approximately a 90% install base? Or am I going to go after an operating system that has a 5% install base? I'm going to go after the 90%. And guess what? You got it, that's Windows. So most of the attacks that are out there, most of the malware is targeted for Windows, which means if you go in, and I do this sometimes, if all of a sudden I get an email and it just seems a little off, but it could be legitimate, it might not, but I don't want to infect my system, I take out my iPhone and I go in and I check the link on there. Because 90% of the time, it wouldn't infect my iPhone. And here's the best part. This iPhone is just for short-term communication. I don't have all my client data. I don't have all my critical information, so I treat it as a second computer. So even on the off chance that this malware might impact an iPhone, I can live with this. If my iPhone gets impacted, I can still survive. If my computer that has all my client data, all my emails, all my financials, if that gets compromised, we have bigger problems and bigger issues. So while it's not perfect advice, it is pretty good advice that if you're not sure about an email and you're going to click on it, the best bet is delete the email, don't click on it. But if you are going to click, it's better to do it on an iPhone or a non-Windows based device, because the problem of infection is much lower. So what I recommend, it's a little more expensive, but for home users, if you utilize a Mac, you still need antivirus, you still need endpoint protection, you still need to be careful. But if you're running a Mac at home, the probability of malware impacting you is going to be a lot less. It's not zero. There's absolutely Mac-based viruses, but most of the emails we see out there today, most of the attack vectors are targeted on Windows. So if you use a non-Windows device, an iPhone or a Mac, you're going to have a better chance of being safe and less chance of being compromised. You still have to be careful. You still can't be sloppy. But since I get that question all the time, if you want to have a better level of protection at your house, Mac OS is probably the better way to go.